Greetings! I wanted to take a quick moment to share how I've been using my vintage Singer sewing machine and attachments to make face masks for healthcare workers in need in as efficient a way as possible. The attachments I've been using, firstly, is this adjustable hem foot. Then there's the Ruffler attachment, which has the options of selecting one pleat every single stitch or one pleat every 5 stitches, with the center setting option of deselecting the ruffling and allowing you to proceed as if you were just sewing a straight stitch. This is the binder attachment tool, the edge guide, and finally the regular presser foot. The adjustable hemmer foot can do the hemming operation in one pass. It folds a 1/8 of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch over and then folds your actual predetermined amount of hem over top and then stitches it very close to the edge. The starting must be done by folding the fabric over like this and then over again. And that's basically what your hem is going to be. You place it under the needle, it loops around the edge, and off you go. So I have here my first strip of fabric. This is for 2 masks. I'm going to stitch along the edge and cut it in half. So this is folding over that first amount, pressing it with my finger, and then folding it over a second time. This gets positioned underneath the needle. Stitching and locking that in place, and then moving the hem over top, looping it around the edge of the hem guide in order to have it ready to go. Now it's important to pull it slightly to the side to allow it to feed through properly, but I do need to make sure that I don't rotate and bend the fabric as we go. So I'm using my left hand to hold it as straight as possible. I'm using my right hand to pull slightly on that hem so that it gives me my straight seam. And there you have it, a hem in one pass. With the face fabric done, now it's time to move on to the backing fabric. And I'm going to begin with the same process that I did on the face fabric by folding over that first 1/8 or 1/16 amount and then folding it over a second time for the full amount of the hem allowance, which is approximately 1/4 inch or so. And finger pressing it in place, positioning it under the hemmer guide and the needle. Doing a couple of stitches to lock in the end. And then adjusting the edge over that foot so that it will complete the operation. After hemming the one side, I proceeded to do the other side, and I repeated this process with the face fabric as well. And there we have 2 hems done. Both pieces are cut down to size now, and I will be using my ruffler attachment to pleat or gather, or whatever you want to call it, between the points that I have marked. And I need to do that on both pieces of fabric. It is important to note that the needle screw needs to fit through that hole on the attachment, as that is what makes the ruffler engage. It moves in sync with the needle. Now I'm going to start off with the ruffler disengaged, just to lock stitch a few stitches. And then when I reach that point that I've marked, I will turn it onto the stitch every stitch, ruffle every stitch. So now I've engaged the ruffler, and I'll go as far as the other mark. And now disengage it and straight stitch to the end. And then repeat on the other side and on the other piece of fabric. Now it's time to join both the front and back pieces together, and to do that I have reattached my regular presser foot. And now I'm pinning the corners together all the way around the outside to secure it before stitching. With everything pinned in place, I am now simply stitching over the stitch line from when I had used the ruffle attachment. So I'm not using the edge guide at this point. I'm simply trying to keep my stitching on top of the pre-existing stitching. And with the edges stitched on both sides, the panels are then turned right side out, and the bottom edge lined up between the two pieces so that that bottom seam can be formed. In all of the masks that I have been making, I have been leaving the top seam open because I wanted to enable the user to be able to insert a filter if so desired. However, that bottom seam is effectively top stitched right over top of the other stitch line so that it is secured and nothing is going to fall out. I must now interject an apology because unfortunately I realized much too late that not only had I stitched up the bottom seam before I should have done so, but I also completely failed to record the video footage for the formation of the side channels. The side channels should be sewn before this bottom seam is created. They are sewn by stitching down either side of the mask approximately 1/4 to 1/2 inch away from the edge. You can use the edge guide for this, and along that red arrow, basically top to bottom. It needs to be a strong stitch. You may want to simply reinforce the ends. You may want to reinforce the entire thing going back and forward. And perhaps a small stitch length would be advisable to ensure that it is as strong as possible. Once those side channels have been sewn, you can then proceed to stitch between them along the base. So from the side channel to the other side channel, not stitching across the bottom of the side channel, simply between these 2 points. Again, reinforce the ends. But once the side channels are made, then you can sew the base seam on the mask. With the main core of the mask completed, the bottom seam stitched up, the top open for a filter, and the side channels formed with everything pleated down so that you're not lifting up a massive rectangle to your face. Now it's time to make the cord ties. And for this, I am using my binder foot. And the binder foot has a marking on it stating that a 15/16 of an inch size strip is required. And believe me, I have tried 7/8 and I have tried a full inch, and neither of them work very well, nowhere near as reliably as this awkward 15/16. So here are my strips of fabrics that are cut to the needed width. They are all 36 inches long, which is the total length I need for my ties on either side. To get the cord started, you need to fold the strip in half and then take the outer edges and fold those into the middle. You're basically creating the shape of a prefabricated bias strip. And then fold the whole thing in half again. And then this skinny piece will go under the attachment. You anchor it right there with the needle to hold it in place, to lock it in place, and then you can position the rest of everything through the attachment. This can be something of a fiddly process, and so it is definitely useful to have a tool or a pin or something you can use to push that strip to where it needs to be. Once the needle has anchored it in place, you can then manipulate the fabric strip into the inside of the binder attachment. There is a channel that you can push the fabric into, and once it's into the center, then you form it to take that same curvature that is on the outside of the attachment tool. And when my hand moves here in just a second, you will see that it takes that circular shape. And this is an ingenious tool because the compression basically forces the fabric to curl, and through a simple movement, it goes from being a flat strip to being a double folded, stitched piece of cording. So that's one cord done and one more to do. Once both cords have been formed, I am using the old-fashioned method of a safety pin attached to the end of cord to feed them through the cord channels on the side. This is repeated for both cords on both sides. Once through, all four ends are knotted. And the mask is completed. I sincerely hope that this video has been of benefit to you. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe so that you can easily find my content in the future. Show me your support with a thumbs up, and if you have any questions or comments, I'd love for you to leave me a message below. Until next time.